They Call Me Dundee by William Lee Stotts. Introduction. They Call Me Dundee was written and illustrated by William Lee Stotts. The idea for the story came when the family adopted an Australian shepherd from the humane shelter in Sierra Vista, Arizona. Dundee, the name given to the family's newfound friend, was such an extraordinary dog that Willi knew she had to have a story to tell. You too will be intrigued with her story as she leaves her birth home, makes her way to the shelter, and then finally finding a home full of love, fun, and her kind of work. Chapter 1. They Call Me Dundee. That's not really my name. At least that's not what I was named when I was a puppy. It was Bonnie then, but many other things have changed also. My earliest recollections are of when I was little more than a small ball of fur. I was born on a ranch in southeastern Arizona. My mother and father were both Australian sheepdogs. I guess my ancestors were bred for the purpose of herding sheep. Although I never had any real training or first-hand experience with sheep, I knew just what to do with them when the occasions presented themselves. The ranch I was born on didn't raise sheep, but was instead a cattle ranch. I can remember that the first sounds I was aware of were cattle and horses and, of course, people. My father worked the cows all the time, and my mother sometimes, but of course, she took time off to have puppies and raise us up to weaning age. I had 3 sisters and 4 brothers, and my first memories are playing in the ranch house yard with them. It was a fenced yard. As we grew larger and our playing took us further and further from the doghouse where we were born, we began to roughhouse in the flower beds. So it wasn't long after that we were put out in the barnyard and shut out from the yard around the house. When we were around 4 months old, the lady who lived in the house put a sign out on the main road, "Puppies for sale or free to good home." One by one, my brothers and sisters began to be taken by people who drove into the ranch. I don't know why I was never taken. My coat is a mottled mixture of black, a couple of shades of gray, and a couple shades of tan. I guess I'm not what you'd call pretty. I think they kept my brother because he was the biggest and most handsome of the litter. But I don't know about me, because people would look at me along with the rest, but no one ever took me. 2 different times little children carried me around, but the grown-ups always made another selection. I was always glad, as I liked life there with my mom and dad. Chapter 2. A Working Dog. When I was 6 months old, the time came for me to earn my keep. Looking at cows from the security of the barnyard and being out in the open field with them are 2 different things. I remember the first morning when I was taken out with the others to work the stock. My thoughts were all of romping and playing alternately with sleeping in the warm spring sunshine without a care in the world. I had no idea what was happening out there with the stock. From the barnyard, the cattle were out a ways and didn't seem to command much respect. I never gave it a thought. Now all of a sudden, here I was with my mother, dad, and brother. I guess the stock was being moved to another pasture. The others were running back and forth, barking excitedly, while the ranch hands on horseback were galloping back and forth, getting the cows started off in the direction they wanted them to go. I was just running around, trying to do what everyone else was doing, when all of a sudden there was this cow that looked like a 2-horned barn on 4 legs. Its head was down, and it was charging at me like one of the big trucks that haul the cows away from the ranch. Its head hit me in the side before I even had time to move. I flew through the air and landed on my head and shoulder. The wind knocked clear out of me. When I was able to get up, I went back to the security of the barnyard. It would be many weeks before I could be persuaded to again venture out into the world of the working dog. Chapter 3. A Time to Mature. I painfully limped back to the barn. There in the hay I would spend the next few weeks with my broken ribs. It hurt to breathe. It hurt to stand. It hurt to lie. For what seemed a very long time, it hurt. Slowly the pain and stiffness began to go away. For the first week I thought I was going to die, so I crawled in under the hen house. Finally, hunger and the realization that I was going to survive drew me back out. In the warm sun, I lay through the days, and the nights were spent in the warm hay in the barn. As the weeks went by, I moved about more and more. Finally, I was able to run again. My brother had a better time of it and was now a very serious working dog, so serious that in the evening when the work of the day was done, he would reject all of my attempts to play. The lady of the ranch came to see me once in a while through the day, but I was otherwise alone. When I was completely healed, the rancher wanted me to once again go out with the others and earn my keep. I would have none of this. The very idea frightened me so bad I would run and hide under the hen house, and no amount of persuasion could bring me out. I overheard the rancher talking to his wife and telling her that if I couldn't be gotten out to work with the others, they would have to get rid of me. There was no sense in feeding me every day if I wasn't going to earn my own way. I resolved to overcome my fears and once again try to take my place with the working dogs. After all, I was now a mature 1-year-old. Chapter 4. A Time of Decision. With the coaxing of my mother and brother, I was finally convinced to come back out to work. The first day I stayed away from any close contact with the cattle. In fact, it was several days before I could muster the courage to even get any of the dust on me. I worked, or rather went out, with the others for the next 6 months. The rancher rented a section of state land for pasture which was across the highway from the ranch. On a spring day, we were moving a small herd to graze for a couple of months or so. This was a new experience, and I was all caught up in the excitement. I almost forgot my fear of the cattle as we all barked and ran behind them, driving them across the highway. One decided it didn't want to go in the gate with the rest and started to turn aside. I knew this was wrong, and instinctively sprang to head it off and turn it back with the rest. As it whirled around, it kicked out with both hind legs. One of its hooves hit my left front leg, right above the knee. The bone snapped, and a hot pain shot up my leg and seemed to reach the top of my head. My eyesight blurred so that I ran blind. It must have been the fence I ran into. I recovered from that and ran, even when I could see and wasn't running into brush anymore. I held my left leg up and kept on running. Slowly I made the decision never to return back to the ranch and the cattle, regardless of what the future might hold. Chapter 5. The Journey. I ran for miles in what seemed like hours. I stayed fairly close to the highway, but not for any particular reason. I had no plans other than to never look at another cow up close if I could help it. Running on 3 legs was making me tired, and as I realized that, I also realized that I had not eaten anything since morning. But I wasn't hungry because of the shock of my broken bone. My strength was fading. There was beginning to be an occasional house now. I could hear children's voices now and then and smell other dogs. But I had never been around either in my short life, and so was frightened and didn't stop. That evening, as I passed by a house, a large German shepherd saw me and came running out through the mesquite, barking and snarling. I was so frightened that I just lay down right where I was. He was huge, and he sniffed around my trembling body. People were calling him from the house, and he finally decided to go back. I was relieved and quickly resumed my journey. At dusk I came to a town. I had never seen so many houses and cars and children on foot and bikes playing in yards and streets. I watched from behind a large cedar tree, too frightened to go out and be seen. After a while, a small yipping dog, with hair all over its face, sniffed me and gave away my hiding place. 3 small children came running to see what she was yapping about. I was so tired, and the pain in my leg was so much, I just lay quietly on the ground. They were all very excited and were so happy and friendly, all of my fears soon vanished. The water they brought was very welcome, and I lapped it all up. They won my confidence, and I was soon limping on 3 sore feet with them to a house. They offered me food, which I nibbled at a bit, but wasn't nearly as hungry as I was tired. We were inside a fenced yard with the gate closed, so I felt secure, as it was kind of like the ranch house yard where I was born. I lay panting under a rose bush by the porch and soon was sound asleep. Chapter 6. I ran away to this. I got stiff and sore through the night from my miles and miles of running. My left leg above the knee was swollen tight. I was so exhausted that even though I would kind of wake up in the night to the pain, the sun was fully up and shining on me when I awoke. The small hairy dog was sniffing at my face and broken legs. She was wagging her tail and was very friendly and concerned about me. I liked her and was glad to have a friend. The small children and their mother came out of the house after a while and patted my head and talked and giggled a lot. The dad came out and they talked, and I heard him say they couldn't afford to feed another dog. He got in a pickup truck, much like those at the ranch, and drove away with kisses from everyone. I was content to rest in the warm sun and recover from my ordeal of yesterday. Some time later I was awakened by activity near me. As I opened my eyes, I saw a man in a tan uniform with a badge on his chest. He was kind of handsome with black wavy hair and a small black mustache. He was smiling and friendly and was petting my head. I felt at ease with him, and so I didn't mind when he slipped a chain with a leash around my neck. He gently pulled me to my feet, and I went limping along with him, holding my left leg up to a pickup truck with a wire cage in the back. He lifted me gently into the cage and shut the door. We were soon jolting along the city streets. I never knew there were so many houses and cars in the world. They were everywhere I looked. Soon we arrived at a place that was quite a surprise. It was inside a chain-link fence with a long building with one pen right after another with a dog in almost every one. They were all barking and jumping up on the wire fence. Some were happy, some were angry, some just sat and looked very, very sad. I wondered what I'd gotten myself into. I knew right away this wasn't a place where I'd want to spend the rest of my life, but had the uncomfortable feeling that that could happen. I soon had a chain-link wire home of my own with a large number 6 hanging on the outside. The floor was cement with part of my new house inside, and through a small door, part outside. I lay on the cold cement thinking to myself, I ran away to this? Chapter 7. A Glimmer of Hope. Sometimes the barking would stop at night for a while, but for the most part, 1 or a dozen of my companions were giving voice to their displeasure. Some barked with excitement, some it seemed barked just to hear themselves, while others snarled at each other and wanted to tear each other apart through the fence that separated them. I soon discovered when I was inside that there was another whole row of pens on the other side of the building, just like the row I was in. There were all kinds of dogs, all colors of dogs, all sizes of dogs. Some had high yapping barks, some with deep-throated barks, some very slow, but almost all were involved in making a deafening sound. I sat or lay most of the time without making a sound. I wondered what was to become of me. People came and went all day long, all kinds of people, black, white, short, tall, alone, in pairs, and sometimes whole families. Often they took a dog out with them on a leash or small ones in their arms, put them in their cars, and drove away. But there were always others coming to take their place. It seemed like some kind of a nightmare. Sometimes they would stop and look at me, and I would think that maybe they would deliver me from this nightmare, but no one seemed to want me. I was in there some time before I came to realize that I was not what you would call handsome or pretty. I didn't get excited and bark or jump wildly up on the wire fence as many did. I just sat in the far corner holding up my swollen leg, watching, or lying on the cold cement, being glad I had a nice warm fur coat to cushion and protect me. Day after day went by like this until a full 2 weeks had passed. Some would say I was homely. Some would say, oh, the poor thing has a sore leg or foot. Most didn't say much of anything. Everyone went away and I was left alone, wondering if I would end my life here in this dismal place. Then one day as I was sitting and watching the workers in the city yard next door, a large step van, the kind you would carry bread or such in, pulled into the parking lot and backed into a parking space. A man, a woman, a small boy, and a girl too young to go to school got out and walked into the pound. They walked the whole length of the side I was on and looked at the bigger dogs. The children looked at the small yapping jumpers, but the parents seemed interested more in the larger ones. They stopped at my cage, and the man knelt down and looked in at me. I had gone up by the fence to watch as they went down the length of the pens, and came back. My heart beat a little faster as he looked into my eyes. The woman looked briefly, then went round towards the other side. The man lingered and put his fingers through the chain link. I don't know why, but when I reached out and licked him, a glimmer of hope came into my breast. He was looking intently to see if I was a boy or a girl. He must have seen as he said, "What'd you do to your foot, girl?" The glimmer became a small flame. Suddenly, he got up and followed the others around the building. The flame went out. Almost right across from me on the other side was a part chow puppy, about 3 months old. She was a 30-pound ball of red fur. I could hear the woman making a fuss over how cute she was and asking what kind she was. The man said she had chow blood, but he didn't think she was a full blood. Maybe mixed with golden retriever, he said, but wasn't sure. The woman suggested they go and find out at the office. I thought to myself, why not? She's young and all that beautiful red hair. The man, however, wasn't so anxious. He said something like, "She's a pup and will tear the place apart. Nothing will be sacred. You won't be able to leave anything out in the yard. She'll tear the clothes off the line." The wife's response was, "But she's so cute." I could just barely hear them at the office as the friendly man gave what he knew about the red-haired pup. She was a stray. A couple had taken her for 3 days, but the man was afraid of her, so they brought her back. The man then wanted to know about the border collie type in number 6. "She's an Australian sheepdog. We picked her up 2 weeks ago. We don't know a thing about her. Haven't really checked her foot. Don't know why she's carrying it. Maybe she was injured by a thorn or cut or something like that." "Well," said the dad, "let's think about it overnight, Mother. We can always get her tomorrow." They left, and about 30 minutes later the pretty little redhead left with someone else. Chapter 8. The Road Home. It felt as though 2 months had passed since I saw the first hopes I had vanish in that big blue and white step van. The next day I hardly noticed as the white station wagon pulled into the parking lot. What difference did it make? They wouldn't even look my way. Then the lady who was in the blue and white step van the day before got out and headed in towards the compound. She just barely glanced my way as she headed around to the other side. She was presently heading for the office to find out where the red chow was and learn that the puppy now belonged to someone else. I could scarcely believe my senses when she and the friendly man with the black wavy hair and mustache came to my inside door. They opened it, and my heart leaped as he put a leash on my neck and handed it to the lady. Was I being taken out of this madhouse? Was I going to have a family with 2 little kids to play with and watch over? Was I actually on the road home? She led me out on my 3 usable legs. I hopped into the back of the white wagon and watched as we backed out of the parking lot and drove away. I was so glad to be leaving, but was also sad for those who were not as fortunate as myself. I never really made any friends there, but felt compassion anyway. We drove about 13 miles into the desert. Near a mobile home nestled in the mesquite, I got a surprise. The little boy and girl of yesterday were joined by a bigger boy and 2 other girls of school age. They ran to meet the wagon, jumping and yelling, "Mommy's home! Mommy's home!" When they saw me, they became even more excited, and I could hardly contain myself as they hugged and kissed me and made me quite welcome. Suddenly 2 goats came out of a small shed that was obviously their house. As I looked at them, something deep within me stirred. Something that said, "This is just another variety of sheep. I know what to do with sheep. I've inherited this from my ancestors." It was different with cows. They weren't something my predecessors had dealt with. But these were more my size. I know how to deal with them. They belonged out there in that shed. On my 3 good legs, I charged at them, and they immediately turned and ran back into the shelter, and the 2 jumped up on the milking platform to avoid my pretended ferocity. The man laughed and said as he hugged my neck, "You know, you're all right. I've been looking for you for a long time. You're going to fit in here just fine." "Of course I am. Of course you have. Of course I am." These days, when I go out back, there are 2 lop-eared heads looking out of that shed, saying, "Who is that masked dog?" My days are now spent keeping those goats in line and making sure that when any of those 5 children go out to play, I provide protection for however far or however long it takes. Oh yeah, I forgot to tell you. There was a small baby in the house who is now 6 months old, who I lick on the face every chance I get. And one of these days, when she gets a little bigger and plays out in the yard and also goes for walks, I'll be right there watching over her too. Life is really great here. Maybe someday I'll tell you something more of it. The end. P.S. A friend named Bob bought a German Shepherd Siberian Husky pup, and when he was 3 months old, Bob couldn't keep him in his place in town, so he brought him out here. We've become fast friends. I'm teaching him to watch over the children and herd, too. The goats don't pay attention to him, but I'm starting him out on the chickens. They're more his size. His name is Sky, but they call me Dundee.